Hello, ANT1001. We have finished all of our chapters. We've gone from an introduction to cultural anthropology, talking about how people, those 5 cultural, biological attributes that culture rests upon: the ability to learn, think symbolically, use language, organize tools, and adapt to environments. And if you look at each of the chapters we've looked at, so we went through language. Language shapes thought. So I want you to really take a moment and reassess all of the readings we've done, especially the ethnographies that went with the chapters. So how language shapes thought. We talked about making a living, how we move from bands, tribes, chiefs, and states, from hunter-gatherer culture into the state economy and agriculture, mass agriculture. We talked about how those bands were led by village heads and then big men, and then evolved to chiefs and heads of state, as we call them, and how that system went from balanced reciprocity, or actually generalized reciprocity, where you didn't own anything and you had to use influence to get people to do things, to the state economy that we live in, which we would call primarily, it's not exclusively, but primarily a negative reciprocity culture, where if I give something, you expect to get something more, and vice versa. So like, it's a for-profit. It's the basis of what we call for-profit. People are trying to make more money than they spend. That's called negative reciprocity. And we still have balanced reciprocity in things like Twitter and Habitat for Humanity, and these aspects of our culture that people give more than they get. So it's like positive reciprocity, I guess. Then we talked about gender and race and the core periphery, semi-periphery structure of the world economic systems. And we had a little brief exchange before we began to talk about what ethnography you would do. Oh, don't forget the body ritual of Nasirma. And don't forget all the other essays that you read. Death Without Weeping. Please think of them as interconnected and interrelated in the barrel model of culture, or the webs of significance that we have been trying to set out as a template for thinking anthropologically. So I asked you a few questions about cargo cults, the little film that we just briefly touched on in class this past week. I had a student in one of the sections reply because he was absent, and he made some responses to the questions that made me realize I really should have gone over them specifically. So the question I asked is, what does the cargo cult video tell you about the cultural impact of inequality between groups by race, class, and wealth? So the 2 groups you'd have to assess are the dark-skinned people from Papua New Guinea and the British, who own the landing fields where the cargo lands, and that these people construct their own symbolic universe of ideas about how people get cargo. They use magical thinking, and they set up a whole cargo field waiting for planes to land from the heavens. And as Clifford Geertz always reminds us, we see the lives of others through lenses of our own grinding, and they look back on ours through lenses of their own. So they're using lenses from their primarily hunter-gatherer culture to figure out how people get the cargo from the planes. And of course, their only explanation is one that is based in the uncertainty of not having the kind of technology that the British have. So they use their best tools of symbolic thinking and language to invent a narrative, a cultural narrative, that explains where the cargo comes from. So the answer to the question, I would say, is this. What does the video about cargo cults say about the impact of inequalities? In this case, the dark-skinned people, between the dark-skinned people and the British whites. It says that the inequality of the technology, of the infrastructure, so infrastructure is encompassing the plane technology, the cargo, that causes a symbolic universe of ideas, or it sits inside the Papua New Guinea symbolic universe of ideas. and it's misinterpreted without ample communication and understanding across the cultural divide. So artifacts, the cargo itself, and the material culture, the technology of planes and landing fields, gets interpreted within the lenses of the Papua New Guineans, looking at the British and the gated, area of the landing fields, and they make sense of it based on their cultural reality, their symbolic universe. What does it say about our shared histories? That we interpret the same things, the same objects, the same aspects of things based in how we have learned to see them. So if they come out of nowhere, like planes, then you'll use the technology. Language is a technology you'll use the cultural technology you have to try and understand it as best you can. But these differences in the way we think about the same things lead to conclusions on both sides that are not necessarily accurate. Anthropologists try to study that and understand it, and that's why the cross-cultural divide between sometimes the ethnographer and the native local people we study is really advantageous, because we can see some of the magical thinking and the myths that happen, which is why it comes under the category of religion, because once again religion deals with uncertainty and those things we cannot control and we don't understand. So the British have an idea, their lenses are that we own property, we own land, so we go into Papua New Guinea or other third world areas, so to speak, and we often try to lay claim to them, own them, use the resources in ways that we would use here in the West, in the United States, and that there's cultural clash, cultural conflict between those two worldviews. And anthropologists have been studying that. Most anthropologists who are interested in those things are doing applied anthropology. They're trying to solve the problem of the exploitation of resources in the third world or in the periphery nations, like in Brazil, where those mothers practice, involuntary infanticide, because the resource of making their own food, having their own land, so being alienated from land, land, labor, and technology that came with the invention of capitalism and for-profit institutions, especially in global transactions, has led to the disparities between the most wealthy and the most poor, both here in the United States or here in New York City, between the wealthy and the poor, or between the wealthy, those in the United States and the West, and those in places like Papua New Guinea and Bom Jesus, Brazil. So, superstructure, then, is directly correlated to the infrastructures of our culture's ways of seeing, feeling, thinking, and behaving and believing. So, all of these things are constantly interconnected. And the culture clash, the disruptions, the begruntledness that we see when people come together from different cultures is an access to understanding what's going on culturally, and that's why we also need to be immersed in a culture long enough to ask the right questions. So I'll leave you there. I know I haven't done a vlog for quite a while. You guys should know that you're doing a really great job, inventing an ethnography for yourself, exploring each other's universes, trying to get a sense of how you see the world and how others see the world by comparison, and trying to get a sense of a mirror for humanity by looking at life through the lenses of whomever you're doing your ethnography with, and trying to get a key cultural consultant to help you see what you can't see from the lenses that you were born with. So make sure you find a key cultural consultant, an expert in the immersive culture, an expert who has been long immersed in the culture you're going to study. So with that, I will see you in class. We're going to start reviewing all the things we learned this semester. I'm going to start asking more of you and talking less. So I will see you on Monday before Thanksgiving. Then we'll take Thanksgiving break, and we'll have about 3 classes left. So I'll see you then. Okay? Bye. Oh, and there was one more thing. TED Talks. Everybody's asking what I should do. I'm getting these strange text messages. I'm pretty clear. You're supposed to list the TED Talks on the back of your work action tracker if you did anything different than what's on the list. All right? And that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Bye.